The legal cannabis industry has unlocked generational wealth opportunities across the country. But the industry's regulatory complexities, constant state of change, and speed of evolution drive confusion for entrepreneurs and investors alike. On this podcast, we'll interview the industry leaders who are shaping the future of the legal cannabis industry to help our listeners understand these idiosyncrasies. This is Cannabis Unlocked, hosted by Key Investment Partners.
All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Unlocking Cannabis with Key Investment Partners. I'm here today with Josh Rubin. Josh is the CEO of a fantastic company that we invested in earlier, actually later last year. The company is focused on basically a new infusion technology that we truly believe is going to take the industry by storm. Feedbacks thus far is that what Three Labs is doing is pretty out of this world. I can certainly say that I've tried the product myself, and it is a very unique experience to say the least, but I don't want to steal any of the thunder from Josh here. So, without further ado, introducing Josh Rubin here, the CEO of Three Labs. Josh, maybe you want to take some time to introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tiby. And thank you for having me on your podcast. I feel we're very much in line to unlocking, and the name of our technology is Unlocked. So clearly there's some synergies here, some natural synergies, which is great. So as Tiby said, my name is Josh. I'm co-founder and CEO of Three Labs. And Key Investments led our first round in Q4 of last year. And it is because of Key Investments that we are already gaining traction on our mission of disrupting and disrupting the industry and revolutionizing the industry. And it really wasn't, if not for Key, we would not be in this position. They were smart enough to invest in us, I would say, and they've been a real pleasure to work with. So I think, and we're going to get into this. One of my biggest takeaways from this whole experience and up until now is finding the right partners is really critical to your success. And Key is really our first partner, and it's already been critical to our success, and it will be success. So thank you. That's my quick spiel. Sorry, that was off script. Tiby didn't ask me to say that, I promise.
All good. No, it's I always appreciate the kind words, and I can certainly say that the due diligence process to actually get to the decision to make an investment with Three Labs was a very atypical process of what we typically do, but we were so impressed by what you guys were doing and the technology that you guys are bringing over to the States today and introducing into the industry is certainly novel, and it's unlike any of the other infusion methodologies or emulsions or whatever that exists out there. Truly a pharmagrade approach to encapsulating cannabis into proteins, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But I think before talking about the tech, I would just love for the audience to hear a little bit about your background, Josh. How did you get started in the industry? Kind of where are you from? The whole nine.
Sure. So I started dipping my toes in the industry pool, so to speak, in around 2016, 2017. I was in business school at Hopkins, and on my news feed popped up something about cannabis coming to Maryland. So I was living in Baltimore. I knew nothing about the industry, just absolutely nothing. So I went to a local state hearing where they were just discussing the regulatory landscape of the industry. And what I saw in that room was opportunity. That's really what I saw. I saw every sector of the industry or of the emerging industry was represented, from accountants to agriculture to waste disposal, and everyone was there just eager to find their place in this emerging market. And so that definitely piqued my interest. And I think when I started surveying the landscape, so to speak, so I had my MBA hat on. So I was calling as many people as I could in the industry, just trying to network. I did some pro bono consulting, just trying to learn about the industry. And I think early on, what I began to understand and what really informed my whole approach was I looked at the industry like it was coffee. Okay, so let's just simplify this. I looked at it like it was coffee. So let's imagine coffee didn't exist today, and then suddenly we wake up tomorrow and there's a coffee industry, and everyone's like going crazy over coffee. Everyone loves coffee. There's a whole legacy market of coffee makers, and now all of a sudden there are dispensaries of coffee, and like everyone's going nuts. So if we look at it like coffee, in the early days of coffee, what is the lowest barrier to entry? It's the bean. The bean is the lowest barrier to entry. And so everyone floods to get their hands on the bean, to produce the bean, to grow the bean, to sell the bean. And early players will make money, but what happens over time? There's an oversaturation of the market. The value of the bean starts plummeting. There's price compression. There's consolidation in the market. And so if you fast forward to today, to make money on the bean and coffee, you basically have to own a continent, right? Like that's how you make money on a bean and coffee. Who's making money in coffee? Anyone who could iterate around the bean. Keurig, Starbucks, Nespresso, anyone who could iterate around the bean. So that was sort of my early sort of understanding of, all right, so I don't think I want to be going towards the cultivation side of the industry or even the retail. Yeah. How do I get to innovation? And so then I started asking people, what does innovation look like in this industry? And this was 2017. And so the reaction I got from most players in the industry that I was meeting, and some of them were major players, was, Josh, we're selling weed. Yeah. like what innovation do you need? So at the same time, I looked at Israel. So Israel has been leading the world in pharmaceutical research of cannabis for the better half of a century. So about 50 years now. It started with Professor Meshulam, as everyone knows. He was the first to identify and isolate THC in a lab at Hebrew University. But now every clinic, research institution, university in Israel has some department dedicated to cannabis. And what really caught my attention was, so here's all of this pharmaceutical research going on in Israel, all this innovation, but it's happening in this silo. Whereas in the US, you have this explosive market that seems to be growing exponentially every day, but no innovation, no R&D. Mm-hmm. Israel has the R&D, but no market whatsoever, nothing to do with it. Israel is the size of New Jersey and has no recreational market anyways. So the original idea, the original thought, the kernel of the idea of Day 3 was, how do I bridge this gap? How do I tap into the innovation coming out of Israel, since they're leading the world, and introduce that to the US market?
Awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, it's certainly something that I think most consumers know out there today, is that the form factors are all quite primitive. They haven't really evolved too much. And, you are certainly starting to see, new categories come in the form of ingestibles, whether it's beverages or, cute little confections like macaroons or chocolates or drops and pills. But the delivery mechanism is not too different than when you created brownies in high school with your friends and ate them, right?
It's the same techniques.
It's very similar techniques, and people, they like to patent them and call them something special. But I guess what we've learned as we've gotten to know you guys is that it's not very difficult to replicate those techniques, and there's nothing too novel about them. And in reality, the user experience is still quite different. And I think it really probably comes down to the metabolic rate, which is going to constitute how somebody, how an edible affects somebody, when it hits them, how long it lasts, what the effect is like. But what you guys are doing at Day 3 Labs with Unlocked is a completely different methodology to delivering cannabis. So maybe talk a little bit about what Unlocked is and why it got you excited in the first place.
Yeah, so I think that we're at an interesting juncture here in the industry, right? I think that for many of the earliest years of the industry was very focused on pulling in consumers who grew up consuming cannabis, were purchasing in the legacy market. And so how do we get that person to come into the dispensary, pay a little bit more because of taxes, but buy through the regulated market, right? So all the products, from dabbable products to flour to, to even edibles, everything was sort of focused on that consumer. And I think that we're at an interesting juncture where we're starting to realize that consumers are wising up to a certain degree, that they're no longer complacent with just, well, we're buying cannabis, so it's really cool. Now they're looking for, well, what about the experience? What happens when I eat this edible? Will I face plant into my couch? Will I wake up under a blanket of Doritos? Like what? What? Like, am I gonna get high school high, or am I gonna actually enjoy this? Like that's sort of like how I view it. And I think the novel consumer right now, smoking in general is not attractive to people, at least, the millennial market, right? Like smoking is unhealthy. It smells, it's not discreet. It's kind of gross to a lot of people. Personally, I enjoy it, but that's just me. And so they want to eat edibles. And so that's what we're seeing over the last several years is consumers are starting to pivot towards edibles more. However, the edibles experience is just not ready for that. right? Like you pop an edible, we've all done it. You pop an edible, you wait a little too long, you ate another one, you eat another one. And then next thing you know, it's like, you know,
You're
4 days
way too
later and
high.
yeah, you're high school high, you're in a hotel in Delaware and you're like, what happened? You know? And so I think what caught our attention about infusion is the trends in the industry. If I want to call out, you know, some brands here, you know, 1906, I think, it really sort of changed the game to a certain degree, and other brands as well. Looking at functional edibles, right? So like now
Absolutely.
we know consumers want functionality. They want to know, they want predictability. And
What's the
so
experience going to be like?
what's the experience? No longer about like, I just want to get really high and play video
Can I
games.
take
That's
this
not
and
where
go
we
to a
are.
concert and
Yes.
not be stoned off my ass for the next
Yes.
5 hours?
Yes.
when
I'm
trying to drive
going
home?
on a hike. I'm going to see my in-laws and I'm really stressed. Like, you know, like
Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Thanksgiving is really rough. You know, like we all
Yeah.
have that crazy uncle. Like, what are we going to do? So I think,
Mhm.
you know, I think it's an interesting time in the industry in the sense that that's where the consumer is.
Yep.
However, you touched on it in what you were saying. There's actually a lot of science that informs how to create those experiences, how to curate those experiences. It actually requires science and innovation, which the industry here in the US just hasn't gotten to. And so
Right.
what interested us about Unlocked was, you know, in the industry today, you know, the way things have been going is, you know, people have been, you know, trying to quickly solve problems, right? Like these are very complex scientific challenges. And this industry is moving so quickly that everyone's just trying to solve problems very, very quickly. And so all the fast acting products on the market, they don't, you know, they don't achieve that, you know, that functionality that the consumer
Right.
is really looking for a variety of reasons, which I'm happy to talk about. The reason why we got really excited about Unlocked is because it's a pharmaceutical technology that was designed to take the cannabinoids, to take the contents of that cannabis and shuttle it directly into circulation. And it wasn't designed this way because that, you know, these pharmaceutical researchers were like, you know, there are these two guys, Tiby and Josh in Colorado, who just, you know, want to have a better experience when they get high, when they eat a gummy. They designed this technology because they were looking at it as, you know, we have cancer patients, we have epilepsy patients, we have autistic patients, children with autism. These are very, very severe indications, and patients are being prescribed cannabis because it provides relief. It actually helps
Right.
them. But what's helping them are those cannabinoids inside of the plant. And so when you eat cannabis, the problem is that your liver metabolizes everything that goes in there. And so you're actually getting a different drug. So the easiest way to explain it is if you take Advil for a headache and it's metabolized in your liver and it turns into Xanax, then you might feel really nice, but you're going to have a headache. Like it doesn't solve a headache. And so this is the problem with cannabis from a pharmaceutical perspective. And so what excites us about this technology is that functionality that the consumer is really craving, that predictability that the consumer is really looking for, this pharmaceutical technology delivers on that promise.
Right. And, you know, there's something that really stood out to me when I first learned about Unlocked and the technology that I then got to experience myself. And it's quite a different experience than an edible. And you kind of touched on it here, right? You know, a traditional edible, you know, it's going through the metabolic system. You're breaking down the cannabis. You're not really getting the effect of all the different cannabinoids in your system, right? So you're not really getting that entourage effect like if you had smoked cannabis. But when I actually tried the Unlocked edible, I felt a more euphoric sense, not the same type of lethargic in the couch feeling that you get when you take a traditional edible. And it's because of exactly what you just said. You're actually getting it directly into the bloodstream rather than passing through the metabolism and breaking down all the other cannabinoids. Am I explaining that correctly, or how would you say that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, what's exciting about Unlocked, in my opinion, is, you know, there are no parlor tricks here that we're using to like trick the body to like get more cannabis in your system or, you know, whatever. We're not going to throw out, you know, buzzwords at the consumer, you know, about bioavailability or anything like that. The exciting piece of this technology is that using systems that are typically used to make vaccines, like we are talking about a pharmaceutical technology that was designed for the pharmaceutical industry, but is now being introduced into the greater CPG market. when you eat that edible, right? So you eat that edible, you know it's different than smoking. It's fundamentally different. And so, what happens with most novel consumers in this industry, and this is, the way that we're approaching the industry today, the novel consumer, so they don't want to smoke, and they try an edible, nothing happens, they'll try another one. We all have a friend that this happened to, and it just hits them like a truck. It's not an enjoyable experience. And then they never touch cannabis again. They just won't touch it again. And so they're missing out on all of the positive aspects and components of the plant, of cannabis, all the enjoyable components. And what this technology does, it takes the cannabinoids and the terpenes in the plant. It's the only technology in the industry today that could achieve this, and shuttles it directly into circulation. And the result is a very clean, very functional, very strain specific high. And it's quite enjoyable across the board.
It'll be the first true live resin or rosin gummy that exists on the market. Correct. Because currently, my understanding is all the live resin or rosin gummies that exist out there, they're using old antiquated methods to deliver cannabis, which are, again, passing through the metabolism and breaking down the cannabinoids, and you're not getting all those terpenes and all those profiles that you're describing right there. So you end up with getting a very similar lethargic feeling. Now, maybe some of the nano emulsion technologies are breaking it down smaller, so perhaps they're hitting the system faster, but from my experience, the effect isn't much different. You're not getting a similar effect akin to smoking when you're taking those, right?
I mean, we've now made many different strains using premium solventless rosin through our partners Oleo in Colorado. And what we saw across the board was each strain. It wasn't like, oh, I think this one's a little bit different. Like I feel a little bit different. No. Like if you had a speedy sativa, then your hands were shaking. You were cleaning your house for the night. Like you were jumpy. Stony indica, you're really relaxed and just like feeling really good. But you're not face planting into the couch. It's a functional high. It's an enjoyable high. And again, this opens up the industry to a whole new segment of consumers that really want this as wellness, as something that could enhance their lives or specific activities, which before this they weren't really able to have access to.
Yep. Well, it's crazy, man. I've seen you guys come a long way. I think our due diligence process took the better part of a year to really get this through, and just the way that we ran the process, I think that we really kind of built the company together. I'm not taking anything from you. This is your baby, but
no, you were accurate. We did that together. You were there. I remember.
The process was just one where we needed to see some proof of concept, and it enabled you guys to do it too. So I'm just curious in a few quick words, like what were some maybe lessons learned from kind of hitting the road and starting a company from the ground up?
Yeah, so I think we definitely, I mean, early on, we understood that being agile in the early days and being able to pivot quickly was very, very important. But once we identified that there was this pharmaceutical company in Israel with technology that could revolutionize the world, that was looking, for us essentially to take over, we knew that there was something really special, and how to get there, that was the big question. And so, lessons learned, I think in the early days, we didn't quite understand the value of choosing the right partners early on, especially when it came to institutional funding or even just investors in general. I think in the beginning we were like, let's just find money and get going. Let's just find anybody who will give us a check and we will just do this. And sometimes we meet with someone who'd be like, I don't know if I could work with this guy, but they do want to invest. Or we'll meet with someone and they have no idea what we're even talking about. And maybe they're the right partner and they have no idea what we're doing. I think what we learned was it's critical in those early days. When you talk about the diligence process that we went through with you, that diligence process helped us establish who we were, like as a
identity almost, right?
Yeah. I mean, like we still had, we hadn't acquired the company. We didn't have the technology. The technology had never been scaled out of a lab before. I mean, it was so early days. The diligence process that we went through with Key it sort of forced us to become operational before we were even operational. And so what we learned in terms of hitting the road there was partners in those early days are so critical, because choosing the right partners, I mean, for us, it ensured that on day one, literally on
Sets
day
the
one,
tone, right? Yeah.
on day one, we were ready. Like we were fucking ready. Like we just hit the
Yeah.
ground running, and it's been nonstop since then. And we would be likely 6 to 12 months behind right now had we not chosen the right partners.
Right. So with that being said, tell me a little bit about where Day 3 Labs is today. We funded you guys back in late December. I know a lot of the initial months here were focused on, getting set up with your first commercial partners, really sourcing equipment. By the way, just a side comment, with regards to lessons learned and you talking about being agile, like that's something that I've really appreciated about you guys, is your ability to pivot and find new, novel, better, and in this case, even cheaper ways to produce your product. So you've already done in the early days, found ways to increase your margin profile, reduce your CapEx spend. That's been fantastic to see from you guys coming out the gate. But what is Day 3 Labs today? How soon will you have product on the shelves? What type of partnerships or commercial partnerships are you excited about? I don't want to spill the tea too quick for everyone else because I'll let you do it, but I think something that's exciting from my point of view, especially as an investor and importantly as a board member too, is that you're like the most popular guy at every networking event that you go to right now. Like I get feedback left and right from brand partners or MSO partners that are like, hey, what is this Day 3 Labs Unlocked? I'm hearing all about this new technology. So yeah, maybe just a little tidbit here on kind of where you guys are today and where you see yourself going and, in the near term future here.
Yeah. Well, being agile was definitely important, to your point. But what, I won't go into it now because we don't have time, but the system that we wanted to use is being used to make COVID vaccines, and we have to find other systems. I mean, if for those entrepreneurs listening, there is no insurmountable hurdle as an entrepreneur. It's just there isn't. But what we're really excited about, and what really gets us out of bed in the morning, all of us at Day 3 Labs, is we're on a mission to enhance people's lives through cannabis innovation. That's number one. And number two, to disrupt the industry, because the industry needs to be disrupted. And that's really our belief. The industry is ripe to be disrupted. So I think, just connecting the dots with what we were talking about earlier, I feel the industry became somewhat complacent for a while. And where Day 3 Labs is we're forcing the industry to move forward in a way that is necessary and beneficial to everybody in the industry. Really elevate the conversation, have science inform innovation, and innovation inform product development, more transparency for the consumer. But where we are today, we're going to have products on the shelves in 2 weeks. But really what we're focused on, so we're focused on that, like we want to get this technology to market as soon as possible, and we will have it. Oleo, our first customer and partner here in Colorado, will have premium rosin gummies on the shelf in just a couple of weeks. Native Roots will be supplying a lot of it for those in Colorado. But really what we're hoping to do here, so with a fully operational pharmaceutical lab in Israel with a full pharmaceutical team working on R&D and clinical work, informing everything that we're doing here in the US and vice versa. I mean, what we're really looking to achieve here, if you recall, I don't think anyone really enjoyed the Palm Pilot, that stupid stylus that never really read what you were trying to write, but it's like all we had. So it was like, whatever, and it wasn't until the iPhone came out that people were like, oh, like it could be better than this. Like, it doesn't have to me just like scribbling on this device. I'm excited for Day 3 Labs to really be pushing this industry forward through innovation, and to really innovate and to really open up the full potential of this plan, which could really benefit a lot of people. So we're going to have product on the shelf soon. We're hoping to scale soon thereafter, we're always looking for partners who understand the need for innovation, the need to disrupt the industry, and have a strong desire to enhance people's lives through cannabis. So that's really, that's where we are.
Yeah, no, that's interesting that you say that, and I love that you bring up the pharmaceutical lab in Israel too, because something that what we really underwrote here was the obvious low-hanging fruit coming in, disrupting really the ingestibles category. That's all recreational, but what you guys are doing is truly a novel pharma-grade approach to delivering cannabis in a more effective way. And I don't know if you can or can't touch on this, so stop me if I'm getting ahead of myself, but the lab in Israel is actually already conducting some pretty interesting studies. I won't go into detail because I'll let you do it. I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself, but the lab in Israel is already partnering with some pharmaceutical companies to study certain diseases. If you can touch on that, Josh, please do. But if it's still kind of under confidentiality, then I'll pause there.
No, I'm happy to, because we're uniquely positioned to innovate because of that, because we have a pharmaceutical lab in Israel, and that doesn't mean we could just test for potency. It's not just a lab; it's a pharmaceutical lab, and so so to that end, we're barely scratching the surface of what this plant can do. I mean, there are 150 cannabinoids. If you run the numbers real quick, that means that there are over 1 trillion different combinations of cannabinoids. It's like figuring out how to unlock a safe, and all those different combinations result in different things, right? And so what we're looking at right now, we were invited to spearhead a major trial in Israel. It's through an Israeli-backed research program to study the treatment of Parkinson's disease with cannabis. And so our researchers in Israel it has started already. Our researchers in Israel are testing cannabinoids and how they interact with human tissue and also neurons from the human brain to actually test which cannabinoids would be efficacious in the treatment of Parkinson's disease. And we just this is our first out of the gate, trial. We definitely intend on pursuing other trials, similar trials. But all this to say is that our mission here is to really introduce a whole other level of innovation to cannabis, in a way that we just haven't seen before.
Yep. Well, Josh, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast here. Super, super educational. I always just love hearing the story over and over again. I think that you guys are going to be a huge winner in the long run here in the industry, but also in the pharma side of things. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention to anybody listening right now that we have recently opened up a second round of funding for Day 3 Labs. The initial round was to kind of get them going, and now we're kind of really putting some growth to work here. So in the event that anybody's interested that's listening here, please feel free to get in touch with myself. I'd be happy to put you in touch with Josh here. These guys are working on something very special. The buzz is real about what Day 3 Labs and Unlocked is doing. Any final words from you, Mr. Rubin?
Thank you again, Tiby and Key Investments, for everything, but also for hosting me on this podcast. And we're just really excited. This is really just the beginning, and we're excited to find more partners, the right partners who could really help us really push this industry forward. And so we're just we're trying to keep our head down and keep this going.
Right on. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us on this episode of Cannabis Unlocked with Day 3 Labs Unlocked, which I didn't realize I was going to get to say today, which is pretty fun. We'll see you guys next time on our next show here. And Josh, thanks again for spending some time with us here today. Bye-bye.
Thank you.